Hello, and welcome to She Leads Biotech, the podcast that celebrates women leaders in the bioscience space. I'm your host, Sharon Cox, CEO and Managing Director of CNA International, based right here in New York. And each week I'll be talking to women leaders about their work, their triumphs and challenges, providing invaluable insight into how women can unlock their superpowers and succeed on their own terms. So whether you're navigating your own career path in bioscience or you're passionate about science and innovation, I hope you're empowered and inspired by each episode. My guest today was gifted a chemistry set as a child, which sparked a lifelong passion for problem solving in the world of science and healthcare. This woman has built an impressive career, from healthcare management consulting to CEO of a biotech company, while also serving as an adjunct professor and chief representative for the Basel area business and innovation team. That's in Switzerland, you know. Among other things, we'll be talking about the power of authenticity, the challenges and rewards of navigating a male-dominated industry, and how she's using her work to make a positive impact on patients' lives. So, please welcome my guest today, Kirsten Detrick. Kirsten, hi. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Sharon. How are you today?
I'm very well indeed. How's things going for you?
Spectacular. You know, I get to live on a lake in Vermont, go down to Boston every now and then, the center of, life science world, but I get to live in, God's country. Let's put it that way.
That boat that I saw on your LinkedIn, is that your boat?
Yes, I wake up to that view every morning. I mean, it's not always quite that colorful, but yeah, that's my view. In fact, I'm looking out at the view right now, right behind the computer screen.
Beautiful. Anybody go check out Kirsten's profile because that view is gorgeous. It's just lovely.
Yeah.
And you're on I think they're called party boats, right?
Yes. The less exciting name is a pontoon boat, but it is a party barge, yes. And I can fit 10 of my closest friends on there, including a few bottles of wine. As you see, I have aperitivo today, so I'm already thinking about the afternoon activities.
Of course you are, yeah. So next time I'm in Vermont, I know where to come for a party.
Absolutely, definitely.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me today. I just find your story very fascinating. Let's start at the very beginning, as it says. Did you choose your sector or did it choose you? How did you end up in the science space?
You know, it's a crazy story. I still to this day vividly remember a chemistry set that my mom gave me. And I was downstairs in the basement, like mixing, liquids with test tubes and Erlenmeyer flask. And I thought that was the greatest thing ever. I was absolutely captivated by it. And, from there, I went on to major in chemistry in college. And I thought I was going to be, a bench scientist. But my senior year in college, I realized, oh my goodness, I actually love science because I love the puzzle of it. But I'm not sure I want to be a scientist because my personality, I felt, was more suited to being out in the business world. And so I started my career actually in healthcare management consulting. I worked in New York, but my clients were all over the country of the United States and advised hospitals and medical centers on all sorts of strategic and operational decisions. And from there, I went to business school at Dartmouth. I went to the Tuck School of Business, earned my MBA. And then I started my career actually in consumer products for a few years in the health and beauty aid sector, which was really fun. And
interesting.
then I moved over to pharmaceuticals, within Bristol Myers.
Okay. So can you expand a little bit on the beauty and the healthcare aspect of it?
My first assignment was as an assistant brand manager on Ban antiperspirant deodorant. And let me tell you what. At cocktail parties, I'm a very popular guest, although a very quiet, stealthy guest, because people always want to come up to me and they're like, so what is the best antiperspirant deodorant? And I know, actually. So that's something that's like an excellent party trick. But, that's actually a drug because it interacts with the human body. It's an FDA-regulated drug. So that was my first entree really into, the promotional aspects, the marketing and sales, if you will, of therapeutics, although it wasn't quite a therapeutic. But I loved that. I loved that job. It was one of the best jobs I ever had. I actually have loved every single job I've ever had, I must say. I thrive where I'm planted, and I just truly, I've been blessed. I've been really, really lucky.
So what are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, I call this moment in my career, in my life, my portfolio career.
Yeah.
I have taken the gig economy idea and really exploded it. I am a adjunct professor at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, which is about 20 minutes away from where I live in Vermont. I'm a CEO of a small stealth biotech where we're researching solutions to lysosomal storage diseases that are really, really serious genetic diseases that affect newborns and toddlers. And our solution actually is something that we think can address the neurological aspects of these grievous illnesses. I work as a chief representative for the Basel area business and innovation team, where I help scaling startups in the biotech space or in the med tech space or medical devices, diagnostics, what have you, life sciences. I help them as they're thinking about moving to Europe, and I guide them as they're making decisions about expanding to their next footprint, if you will, and help advise them on those choices, particularly when it comes to Switzerland generally and the Basel area specifically. What else am I doing? I'm an advisor and a global partner in a consulting firm called Silentia, where we help startups and emerging and even for publicly traded companies, but they're really starting to scale and get into the commercialization space. We help them develop their drug development and commercialization strategy. So I kind of do a little of everything. And because of that, I get to live on a lake in Vermont. I swear I've designed an incredible life and career. So that's kind of where I am right now.
And did you choose all of that? I mean, did you strategically say, okay, I'm going to be a professor at this, and I'm also going to be involved in this? Or was it circumstances
You
or
know, I do believe that
kismet?
you make your own luck, but I also believe that there is kismet. When I spent 30 years roughly in the corporate world working for, blue chip companies like Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, Takeda, and I loved every minute of working for those companies. I adored my roles there. I was typically leading major multi-billion dollar blockbusters or launching those kinds of therapies. You may have heard of some of these drugs like Enbrel for rheumatoid arthritis and psoriasis, or you may have heard of Entyvio, which is indicated for IBD diseases. So
I
these
know
are
that
big.
one because of the advert.
Yes, yep,
And
exactly.
Tivio and Tivio and Tivio. So
Yes,
on
that's
it.
right, exactly. I loved those roles, but when I left Takeda, I was in Europe. I went to work in Europe for about 8 years for Takeda. And I came back to the United States and I had a really a once in a career opportunity to really think about what I wanted to do. And when you're in a peaceful location like I live in, I was able to really reflect. And I just started talking to people. I set myself a goal of networking with people, different people 3 times a day, which to lots of folks is like, oh my gosh, how can I do that? Well, networking is not a hard thing. It's just making new friends. That's always the way I've seen it. And so I networked and I really became excited and interested in these new opportunities to talk with people and share with them where I was thinking about where I might want to go, what I might want to do. And that led to so many different opportunities and avenues. Certainly, there's certain elements of my career that I hadn't planned, but I'd been working on for years. So, for example, I had guest lectured at the Tuck School of Business for maybe 20, 30 years. Once a year I'd go, once every couple of years I go and I'd write a case study and I'd teach. And then I was up here doing that, at one point, and the head of the healthcare network group there said, "Hey, thanks for coming so far, from Europe to be here." And I said, I didn't come from Europe. I live down the road now. And she said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "You want to help us and be an adjunct professor?" I said, "My God, that would be a dream come true." And so it's funny. I think you make your own luck. And one of the things I've always believed, Sharon, is if you zig when others are zagging with your career, that can be a winning strategy. I can't tell you the number of times I've taken a role and people have thought, "Oh my goodness, what are you thinking? That's a crazy move. Don't do that." And then 2 years later, the same people come to me and say, "How did you know to do that?" And I didn't. I just sort of followed my path and I was very authentic to the things I was interested in, the way I wanted to live my life. I have 2 amazing children. My husband has been, a wonderful, partner in all of this adventure. And I've been able to put it all together, not all at the same time. because there have been some tough times, let me tell you, but that's kind of what I've done.
Fantastic. I
Yeah.
want to just go back to all the time that you spend in the big corporate companies and leading teams there. Now, these big corporations, they are very male dominated. They just are. I mean, there's more men in there than women. How did you find that? You said you loved it, had a great time. What did you find were the challenges being a woman in a big corporation?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much a challenge of being a female, although that's certainly, there is an element of like it's not so much gender based maybe, but like I don't play golf. It's just, I
Yep.
play it, but my handicap is probably like, I don't know, a 70. So I don't play it well. So I'm not going to be in that milieu. But I did find that I was able to identify allies within the company, sponsors who were going to help and guide me. I mean, the executive who gave me the chance to lead a country as a general manager, and then it really expanded to a small region, that is funny. That man, he is a great leader. And I remember when we were kind of figuring out the contract details, I went to his office at one point and I started bawling my eyes out because I was going to Austria and I said, I don't speak German and I don't know how to do this. I was crying. I kept thinking to myself, there's no crying in business. And he was wonderful. He was wonderful. He said, I don't have any Kleenex in my office, but I think there might be some in the ladies' room. I'll be right here. And, I kind of went and I collected myself, but, he sort of emotionally embraced who I was at that moment. And that's what I needed. I have to say, maybe for me, I wanted to be my authentic self, during my corporate career. I found it was so important. It takes too much energy to be somebody else. And, that means you sometimes have to find the organizations that fit and are looking for your particular brand of authenticity. And I was very lucky.
Yep.
I found those organizations. And at each company I was there for, give or take a few years, but basically 10 years at each organization. And I found that, each organization was big enough that there were so many new opportunities. And yet, so I was able to stretch myself and stretch my dreams, if you will. But I also was able to do so by, juggling everything that I had on my plate. I had, young kids, little kids, when I was launching a product called Prolia. That was a tough launch. And I had teenagers when I was launching Entyvio. I now have post-college kids, and believe me, little people, little problems, big people, big problems.
Tell
And,
me about it.
settling my daughter into her first ever apartment in New York City as, a recent college graduate, while I'm also getting not one, but two companies off the ground, as a startup entrepreneur, you got to figure out how to be your true self and let people know, like, hey, I'm moving my child into an apartment this week. Sorry, I'm not going to be available. Or I will be available if it's a real emergency. But juggling those things is something that I think is really important. And by the way, men do that too. They just don't talk about it as
Uh,
much.
uh, yeah, and I think it's also the honesty factor and not being afraid to be
Yeah.
honest. I know, times in my career, and people they've needed to go and do something that's a personal thing, and they've come up with these most unbelievable reasons as to what they're doing, and I just think, why? Listen, my kid's important to me. I need to make that happen,
Yeah.
whether it's I want to be at the sports day or I want to do this. And I think as an employer or as a team leader or something, you should be able to accept that. And I think if people who you work with can, then that's where the harmony and everything comes in. I think it gets lost if there isn't the transparency and there isn't the honesty and that authenticity to say, listen, I'm sorry, I will get the work done.
Yeah.
This is important to me and this
And
is what needs to happen.
And here's the deal. As a leader, if you model the behavior that, I'm going to focus on this particular aspect of my life that really doesn't have anything to do with my professional career, it gives permission to others in your team, in your company, in your organization, to realize that they don't have to always have their shoulders hunched up. They can kind of relax when it comes to saying, I have to dash out because, I really want to see my child's school play at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'll be back at 3:30 and I'm going to, finish what else I have to do. And I think
Yeah.
that, that if you're a leader who leads authentically, then you actually get people to show up authentically, and then you get their absolute best performance because they're not wasting
Yeah.
energy trying to be something they're not. They're focused on doing the job at hand and being who they really are. And I think that's really, really important. I've always thought that's
Yeah.
important.
And they'll go the extra mile for you as well.
I think
More
so.
inclined to, teams that have worked for me, it's, you give and take, and when you really need it, people come through for you because of how they've been treated themselves. So
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about what you've done and family that's involved in that, because as you say, you've lived in different countries, you've been all over the place, you've had a young family. Did you pack up the family and take them with you? Did you travel back and forth? But how did it work as your kids were growing up?
Yeah. So when our kids were, I think, my husband, our philosophy about parenting is, you got to match what you're, the kinds of decision making, what's the word, that not accountability, but agency that you give your children that matches their age. So when we moved to California, from New Jersey, Southern California, the kids didn't get a choice. And we just moved and they were happy to move. And we got them settled in daycare. And, there was, all sorts of, the many challenges around that. But, we sort of had an open mind about it in that things aren't going to be perfect. Not everything's going to work. We're going to have to do our best. When we, 10 years later, moved to Europe, our kids were older. I think they were 12 and 10. And, that's at an age where they're clearly, cognizant of the move, but we didn't really want to give them a choice. I don't think you can ask a 10-year-old, do you want to move? Because what's the answer going to be? No. So what my husband and I did was it was a presidential election year, and there were debates going on between the candidates. And I remember we were kind of watching the debate with the kids, and I turned to my husband. I said, "This is a brilliant idea. Let's use this about going to Europe." And so what we did is we sat the kids down at the dinner table and said, "Okay, we're just curious. We were talking about this, Daddy and I, and what would how would you think about moving to another place? Like, let's say, well, I don't know, Switzerland, which is where we're going. One of you take the side that it's a terrible idea, and one of you take the side that it's a great idea, and you two debate what's terrible and what's great." And then we made them switch positions and argue the other side. And what we heard from them, without them knowing, they thought it was just a random dinner conversation. What we heard from them was so insightful. We heard one say, we lived in Southern California, we had season tickets to Disneyland. One said, "Well, there's no Disneyland in Switzerland." And the other kid says, "I think Disney's a big company. I think they might have Disneyland somewhere in another country." And of course, there's Disneyland Paris.
Yep.
So we kind of heard their concerns without them actually being concerned about it. And then when we did decide to move, we again went to the dinner table and said, "Okay, so Dad and I want to share something with you. We are moving to a country called Switzerland." And we told them all about the country. And then we said, "We want each of you to come up with 2 requests that will help make this an easier transition for you. And we don't want to hear about the requests now. We want you to think about it. And then we want you to come back and tell us what those requests are." And one request was, would we be able to come back and see our friends? Well, yeah, of course we can do that. That's easy. Another request from one of the kids was, "Well, could I get a Facebook account?" This is back in the day. And we thought about it. For that child, we said, by the time we get to, we'll talk about that. That's something I think we can deliver on. The requests were so easy. And there was no drama about, "I don't want to leave my friends." I remember my son had an auction. He's a skateboarder. Now he's a graduate. He works at Sotheby's in New York. But, he had an auction with all of his friends of a lot of his stuff, like his skateboard equipment and things. And it was such a fun thing for him and these, 12-year-old boys to do. I remember in our driveway in Southern California. I think that there's ways to move your career forward with the support of your kids. Later on, by the way, when we moved from Switzerland to Austria, my son was a rising junior in high school. And that was when we asked him, "What do you think about this?" And do you know, my son's response to that question was, Mom, if we move, is this a good career move for you? And I said, I think it would be a great move. And my son literally said, let's go. And he really, hey, it was a great opportunity for him to live in another new city. But moving as a junior when you're applying to colleges in a year and reestablishing friends and, getting teacher recommendations on, he really, he kind of made a sacrifice for me. But he didn't hesitate, not for one single second, and I'll always be indebted to him for that, really. I think quite genuinely my son made a gift. It's more nature, he's just a person who's an adventuresome individual. My daughter is too. So she was a rising freshman, but it's funny. A lot of parents who are in the corporate world think moving, it's such a drama, for their children. But actually, if you're moving, for example, overseas, the truth is that most expats are on a 2 or 3 year contract. So,
Yep.
The children in any school are going to be moving every third year or every year. So, the kids in overseas schools embrace students coming who are new. They're like, a third of my friends just left. Here's a new 30% of the school population. I can't wait to get to know them. It's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are hesitant to move, even, within the United States because of these reasons. But I think, maybe if we all just sort of, again, back to authenticity, it won't be easy, but it's also not going to be the hardest thing you ever do in your life to make new friends. If the family's happy, then, you'll be a happier leader, a happier employee, you'll be more productive. And I think sometimes my own assessment is I think we put too much stress on ourselves. We've got to be perfect instead of, kind of being a little bit more than good enough, so solid B.
Excellent. So I realized when we spoke briefly, why do I know this one? And I remember being at the Bio 24 conference in San Diego, and you were there in red and white on the Swiss stand doing your thing.
I was.
Here's an opportunity now. Saw a post recently that is it
Basel?
Basel?
Yeah, it's really, Basel is the life sciences hub of Europe. I mean, Roche and Novartis are headquartered there, and largely because of that, but not exclusively. There's also incredible universities, what's called ETH, which is the MIT of Europe, really. It's the Zurich, very famous university where, Einstein attended and taught, and the University of Basel, these incredible universities. So you have this really interesting sort of environment where life sciences flourish in Basel. Basel is the Boston of Europe when it comes to biotech. There's no question about it. Tax advantages in Switzerland in general, and even within the country, quite frankly, Basel has more, for example, commercial talent, pound per pound. There's almost twice as many people who are commercialization experts in Basel than in any other city in the country. And the depth of scientific talent in that area, it's extraordinary. And it's been fun for me to work with the Basel area business and innovation team, as well as what we call Business Location Switzerland, which is helping organizations that are scaling come to see that there's an incredible milieu of science and industry and innovation, the Basel area. So yeah, I've written a couple of articles. I think I have one coming out soon on LinkedIn about that exact topic.
So anybody who wants to know about moving their business there, they should reach out to you.
In fact, Basel and Boston are sister cities. They have an agreement, the two.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The canton of Basel and the state of, actually it's the state of Massachusetts, it's even broader than just Boston, have a sort of one of those sister city relationships. Pretty interesting.
Oh, there you go. I was in Boston recently, actually. It was my first visit to Boston. And
what did you think?
I loved it. Obviously from being from my fellow homeland, I guess, when they were all part of the Commonwealth.
The colonies, huh? I'm drinking tea, although it's iced tea in your honor.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. No. I actually really enjoyed it. It was smaller than I thought, which meant I managed to get round it in a day. I liked the architecture. I liked the feel, and the people were lovely.
Oh, yeah.
Even with my friend who I was with walking around with his Yankee hat and Yankee shirt on for the entire time, everybody took it in very good grace. So it's great fun. I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
So,
that's wonderful. That's great.
so what does the future look like for you now? I mean, you've done so much, you're doing so much still. What's left for you to do? What do you want to see the next big thing come from for you?
Yeah. It's funny. I want to be all used up. When I finally say goodbye, I want to be all used up. I think, right now I'm on this incredible voyage of discovery. And everyone I talk to who I advise or I coach or I mentor, I really do, share this idea of living your authentic self and building dreams for yourself that are, a little bit of a stretch. So right now I am building a lysosomal storage disease company with, some incredible scientific founders. We're doing something that's going to dramatically impact in a positive way the families and these children who are affected by these really awful enzymatic imbalanced diseases. And that to me is more meaningful than anything else. I mean, that's really why I ultimately stayed in this career, because although I love the puzzle of science and I love the fascination of science, and I am intrigued by converting or translating scientific scientific progress into business advantage, really when it comes down to it, I am in it because I deeply care for these patients. Whether I have worked in the psoriasis category, in the Crohn's disease category, osteoporosis category, now in lysosomal storage diseases, patients are waiting. And that to me is a very deeply held anchor, for my beliefs and how I built my career. I may have started in a very odd sort of consumer products area, but I found my way. And you asked if it was earlier if I had a plan. I don't really have a plan for my future. I mean, I have sort of written things down. I tend to take a lot of notes and write things down a lot. And, I sort of have these notions about, this would be interesting. I always knew I wanted to be a CEO. I didn't know how big the company would be. It's a little tiny startup, but hey, we're raising money. We've got grants from the federal government and the state of Minnesota. This is really exciting stuff. And I never in a million years thought I would be able to do this, but here I am doing it because I know I'm not perfect. I know I don't know every answer, but I do know one thing I'm good at is building great teams. And that is how you really achieve, not only your dream, but the dreams of people on your team. And if you know what their dreams are, you can help them achieve those dreams while you're also helping patients.
Right.
So,
and that there's such a sense of satisfaction in doing that, of seeing other people succeed.
Yeah.
And the input that you've had in helping them to do that. I just think that's so important.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, because I'm sure you want to get what you've got to do done and get on that boat. I think it's beautiful up there, isn't it, at the moment?
Gorgeous. Yeah. Lovely day.
So what's your sort of parting advice for women in particular coming through the ranks? They're not sure with their directions. They maybe know they want to be a CEO, but what would your advice to them be?
I think first of all, you really do need to know yourself, and that includes really understanding your flaws and being able to understand the areas that you're just, it's not so much a weakness. It's just things you haven't grown yet, things you haven't developed yet. Yep. And surround yourself with people who will tell you the truth. When you really care about someone, have you ever had lunch with somebody and they let you leave and an hour later you go look in a mirror and you have like lettuce in your teeth? And you're like, why didn't the person tell me at lunch? And it's because it's embarrassing and it's awkward and it's a difficult conversation. Nobody wants to do that, right? But if you really care about somebody, you say you have something in your teeth. Yep. I think that is exactly how to look at feedback. If someone, it's hard to have a conversation about, Kirsten, when you did this, you weren't as effective as you might have been if you had done that. And yet, if people have the leadership qualities and the care to tell you that, listen to them. Yep. So be sure that you're surrounding yourself, whether it's, actively with peers, with people that report to you, trust what they're telling you, and create an environment where you get that feedback. That really is a huge advantage. I think, you don't have to write something down in stone, but I did write something down many, many years ago, about 30 years ago. I just wrote a few columns and a couple of rows, and I thought, these are the skills I'd like to build. I didn't even think about the job titles. I
Yep.
just thought these would be interesting opportunities where I could learn something. I could learn something about, developing people. I could learn something about business strategy. I could learn something about the depths of scientific innovation. And then I kind of tried to fill in the boxes on that grid that I created through the jobs that I took or the jobs I sought out. I do
Yep.
think scaring yourself is a little bit important. Sometimes doing the thing, feeling the fear and doing it anyway, is really key, because that's how you grow. Growth is not, that's why they call it growing pains. It's not an easy sort of, lie on the couch kind of thing. It can be uncomfortable, but being
Yep.
uncomfortable is okay. And I think, in terms of setting goals for yourself, they don't have to be, big, hairy, audacious goals, although I love those too. Sometimes it's just doing a little bit, each day toward that dream that you have.
It's having that big goal,
Yeah.
and then the little goals to get to the big goal, right?
Yeah.
So you can have that, but that isn't the be all and end all. I think so many people have this great big hairy audacious goal, and if they haven't achieved it by the end of the week, it's like, well, that's it, I'm a complete failure.
I totally agree. Instead of just having little tiny steps, did you do a little better than the day before? Did you advance towards your goal? Just a little tiny step. Some days it's a huge step. I think differentiating yourself is also important. I can't tell you the number of folks I talk to want to be like so-and-so, sitting across, well, no longer sitting across the hall because we're all remote, but, so-and-so who's in the upper right of the 9 squares on your Zoom. Well, why? I should be more like that person. No, you shouldn't be more like that person. You should learn from them. You should think about, the things that they do that maybe make them very effective, but learn how to differentiate yourself and your skills from other people. I mean, I've done some crazy things in my career. I took a job once where I was new in the role. My boss said to me, I heard you know a lot about Japan. I was like, yeah, I went there once for vacation. She says, that's enough. That's good. That's good. I need you to figure out how to advance our clinical trials in this particular category, and we need to speed this up in Japan. Go figure that out. I thought, oh my God, I don't know how am I going to do this? I'm not even a clinical trials expert. And you know what I did? I sat down at Google, this is a long time ago, and I figured out who was always quoted, always referenced by other Japanese scientific authors in this particular category. And I read their papers, which were written in kanji characters, by reverse translating them using Google Scholar and Google Translate. And I found this guy, and then I figured out who I was connected to. It was like 3 degrees of freedom. And then I went to a colleague of mine at the company who's a dear friend and said, hey, you want to go to Japan with me and convince this guy to lead our trials? He said, sure, I'll go. So we got on a plane, went to Japan, and we advanced the speed of the trial by 2 years. And, that was a crazy assignment. But I didn't know the first way to do it. But I tell you what, apparently I was differentiated as a Japan expert in the mind of this new boss. And lo and behold, years later, I went to work for, what I consider to be the world's greatest, Japanese headquartered, but, global, really biotech pharmaceutical firm, which is Takeda. I mean, it's funny how things happen, right? So differentiating yourself, I think, is key.
And that's part of the authenticity as well that's run through what we've been talking about today. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will definitely be letting you know when I'm up in the Vermont area. I will bring wine as well. So
please do. Please do. Aperitivo.
It will be lovely to be. I think that's the one thing I miss. I mean, COVID did a lot of, being able to open up and talk to people in lots of different places rather than just being a New York-based company. But it is much more. Those personal connections are always so much more effective than screen. So it will be lovely to meet you again. You're going to be in Boston for Bio 25?
Absolutely. I'm going to Boston tomorrow. I go to Boston all the time. I mean, it's and New York as well. I mean, that's one of the things that I think this new post-COVID world has enabled us. I can do really exciting work from a fairly rural location, but I can be in Boston and New York in, just a couple hours.
Excellent. Well, definitely let me know when you're next in New York, and
I look forward to it.
We can share a cocktail or two.
Sounds fine. Looking forward to it.
It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, Sharon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. She Leads Biotech is brought to you by CNA International USA, a woman-owned boutique search firm based in New York. If you're looking to hire talent for your company or want support in achieving your career goals, please reach out to me at contact@cnaint.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And remember, the success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. So don't be afraid to share yours. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.